The Shot That Sparked WW1. A bloody conflict that claimed over 15 million lives, involved more than 100 countries, and tore Europe apart, World War I was a powder keg exploding that had been pressurizing for years. The spark? 2 bullets fired by a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb. Gavrilo Princip had been placed there by an underground Serbian society, operating under complete secrecy. All 6 of the previous assassins had failed, but Gavrilo wouldn't. When he locked eyes with the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, drew his gun, and squeezed the trigger, he dreamt of liberating his people. But no one could have guessed the chain reaction of events that would end in a horrifying new age of warfare, the collapse of empires, and the rise of evil. This is the story of the man who fired the shot that sparked World War I, and how it changed the world. Young meets the Restless. In his first year as a teenager, Gavrilo Princip made the journey by foot from his tiny home village of Oblijaj in western Bosnia to the center of the country. Gavrilo and his father took days to complete the journey through treacherous mountain ranges, with only a horse to aid them before catching a train to the country's capital, Sarajevo. Here, his father returned home, leaving Gavrilo to finish his education alone. This was long before the country would have any autonomy of its own like today. Back then, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a monarchy ruled by the House of Habsburg. The Habsburgs were a royal family whose rule dated back to the 13th century, but by Gavrilo's time, it was in its last gasps, with only its claim over Austria-Hungary keeping it in power. The empire was bigger than the total area of Japan and the UK combined. Using today's borders, it stretched from the modern-day Czech Republic in the northeast, down to Croatia and Serbia in the south, and as far as Romania in the east. Some parts of the empire, especially in the area known as the Balkans, had never truly accepted their monarchic rule. In Bosnia, Austria-Hungary had promised to propel the local population into the modern world, but rarely delivered more than basic infrastructure. Rumblings of revolution were echoing through cities, especially among young people. When a bright-eyed Gavrilo Princip arrives in Sarajevo in 1907, he feels the will to reclaim territory from a distant empire. He's drawn to politics, attends protests, and joins the Young Bosnia political group. Gavrilo reads political literature, learns about socialism and nationalism, and urges his classmates to rebel. Identified as a troublemaker, he's expelled from a prestigious grammar school and feels the limits of operating in a city under Austrian control. But he was finding his own path, and set off without money or a plan hundreds of miles northeast into Serbia and its bustling capital of Belgrade, where he knows there's much more power for resistance. Unlike his birthplace, Serbia was governing itself. It had defeated the Ottoman Empire and won a war of independence in 1878, supported by Bosnia and Russia. Belgrade is a hotbed of political activity. Better yet, Gavrilo's vision to gain full independence once and for all for the South Slavs of Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, and Montenegrins is shared by some powerful people. Since 1901, a shadowy group of military officers and political activists had been pushing for radical change from inside Serbia. Named the Black Hand, the organization was run under the command of a notoriously brutal Serbian military officer. Named the Black Hand, the organization was run under the command of a notoriously brutal Serbian military officer, Captain Dragutin Dimitrijević. Dragutin had been instrumental in the assassination of a Serbian king and his wife in 1903. Known as the May Coup, the assassination wiped out a dynasty and made way for a kingdom more hostile to Austria-Hungary, and where Dragutin had more influence. But even after cementing his place as a senior military figure and later becoming the head of intelligence, Dragutin isn't satisfied. He has much bigger ambitions. To realize them, he morphs the Black Hand into a group called Unification or Death, aimed at freeing and uniting South Slavic people. In 1914, Dragutin orders the group to begin training fighters in complete secrecy. One of these members was a 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. They are given money, fake documents, and weapons, everything needed to execute a daring mission, to eliminate the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The perfect occasion is on the horizon, with the Archduke set to arrive in Sarajevo for an inspection of the army. Traveling together with a couple of fellow extremists, Gavrilo heads from Belgrade to his former home with a group of young Bosnia members, ready to make history. One wrong turn. The Archduke and his wife got off on a train in Sarajevo on the morning of June 28, 1914, and were ushered into a sports coupe, an open car that would take them the short drive to City Hall. It was one of 6 cars in the procession, most filled with policemen and security. The royals had been welcomed with open arms by locals so far, and were full of confidence. However, some security leaders had already warned them that nationalist resentment was in the air, and there was a chance of an attack. They were right. Gavrilo and 6 other men are scattered throughout the city along the route that the motorcade would be taking. Each was equipped with bombs, revolvers, and cyanide capsules for Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. As the Archduke's car moved through the Apple Quay alongside the Miliatska River, the first 2 assassins fail. One bomb doesn't detonate, while the second ricochets off the target car and explodes behind. Several people are injured, including security personnel, but the Archduke survives unscathed and the suspect is quickly captured. Somehow, the Archduke was still undeterred. He orders the tour to continue as planned. Luckily for him, in the minutes that follow, 3 other assassins either fail or lose their nerve at the last moment. At the town hall safely, the royal visitor gives a short speech and complains about the assassination attempt. Now, it's time to change plans. The next stop at a nearby museum is cancelled, and the Archduke and his wife make their way to the hospital to visit victims injured by the bomb. However, they never make it there. By complete chance, the motorcade takes the wrong turn, which happens to be a road on the original route. Here, Gavrilo Princip is waiting, the final assassin whose chance had fallen into his lap. It was now or never. He steadies himself, pulls his gun from his coat pocket, and fires 2 bullets as he walks up to the Archduke's car. One hits the Archduke, the other, his wife. Rather than being celebrated as a hero, Gavrilo is soon ambushed by an angry crowd and secured by police. But it's too late. The Archduke's wife dies within minutes, and the Archduke is officially declared dead a few hours later. In that moment, those 2 bullets had pierced more than just the Austrian monarchy. They had cut through the delicate political balance of the Balkans, Europe, and the world. And it didn't take long for things to unravel. Cashing a blank check. Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination didn't automatically trigger a regional or global conflict. First, an investigation was launched, where the group of assassins were quickly identified and interrogated extensively by Austrian police. Gavrilo refuses to give up information on who was behind the planning of the attack, instead claiming that he acted alone. His co-conspirators kept silent until one cracks under pressure and reveals everything. The police are led on the trail pointing to Serbia and to close aides of the mastermind Dragutin Dmitrievich, but never the captain himself. He had deliberately structured the Black Hand to make himself almost untraceable. Meanwhile, in Serbia, news outlets published pieces tacitly endorsing the assassinations. Austria demanded that Serbia pull its media in line, but the government claims it's outside of their constitutional jurisdiction. The Prime Minister, Nikola Pasic, warned Austria that Serbia is ready to defend itself if necessary. In the days after the assassination, Europe slowly inches closer to war, descending into a political crisis. Austria-Hungary was already motivated to invade Serbia and tighten its grip on the region. Their main hesitation was poking a bear. A response from Russia, a power that had deep ties with Serbia and a far bigger army, could be catastrophic. Knowing this, the Austrians plead to their German allies for backup. Not only does Germany offer support, but they give a blank check, meaning that it would back any kind of military action. Towards the end of July, Austria-Hungary delivers Serbia with an ultimatum, at a time of just 48 hours to accept. Included in the list of 10 demands, Serbia would have to get rid of any anti-Austrian media, agree to a thorough Austrian investigation and trial of suspects, as well as remove several selected military officials. Neither the Austrians nor the Germans expected the Serbians to accept, but a refusal would give them enough pretext to launch swift military action, ideally before Russia was able to mobilize. At the time, Russia was allied with both France and Britain. The chain reaction towards the European war was now horrifyingly close, with Germany and Austria-Hungary on one side, and Russia, France, and Britain on the other. Both Serbia and Russia readied for warfare while still engaging in negotiations. Serbia accepts 9 of the demands from the ultimatum, but draws the line at allowing a foreign power to involve itself in a criminal investigation. This was either a genuine attempt at peacemaking or an empty gesture to sway international support. Either way, Serbia's response wasn't enough for Austria. Just 3 days after Serbia's response was received, and 1 month after Gavrilo Princip had fired his fatal shots, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia and passed the point of no return. It was time to cash the blank check And Germany has a secret deadly strategy up its sleeve it had been planning for years. The Schlieffen Plan, and a new form of war. With Austria-Hungary's relatively small military, it meant that Germany would be doing most of the heavy lifting. Germany declares war on Russia and France, moving quickly to invade Luxembourg and Belgium to prepare for an attack. It was all part of Germany's blueprint to take Europe, called the Schlieffen Plan. It had been crafted almost a decade earlier to deal with Germany's eternal problem of being surrounded by enemies. Throughout the 19th century, the solution to this problem had mainly been diplomatic relations. However, the time had arrived for more decisive action. The Schlieffen Plan relied on lightning-fast coordination, a rapid mobilization to the west to defeat France before pivoting back to the east and focusing resources on Russia. The most effective route to evade the heavy fortification France had put up on their border was through Luxembourg and Belgium. There was little risk of either of these small countries putting up any meaningful resistance. If German forces moved through the territories fast enough, their military could invade the north of France in different waves. The first wave would roll through Brussels over the French border and swing down past Paris, while 5 more would secure territory all the way up to the Western Front. Their timeline gave them 6 weeks to pummel France into submission. As tanks and soldiers marched through Belgium in early August, the Belgian military put up more resistance than anticipated, delaying the Schlieffen Plan by precious weeks. When they finally broke through, German soldiers made it as far as the Marne River, just 25 miles outside of Paris, before getting bogged down in bloody, brutal, and sluggish battles. This was a new kind of fighting: trench warfare. Both sides dug into the terrain with networks of trenches aiming to break through the enemy's defenses. In the open field between the trenches, barbed wire and traps were laid. These systems were excruciatingly difficult to penetrate, leading to a staggering number of casualties. In one battle, Britain lost almost 20,000 soldiers on the first day. The Allies had many other disastrous losses in the coming months. In the Second Battle of Ypres, a chemical weapon attack quickly claims 5,000 troops. The Gallipoli campaign takes the lives of over 200,000 Allies, and around 400,000 French troops fall in the Battle of Verdun. This was a new kind of warfare the world had never experienced before. By the time the Meuse-Argonne battles brought the war to a close in November of 1918, 4 years after it began, between 15 and 20 million people had died. That's more than the entire population of the Netherlands today. In the wake of the war, the Treaty of Versailles was proposed by the Allies. Blame is given entirely to the defeated nations, most of all Germany, which will have its land taken away, its military power stripped, and reparations will need to be paid to be equal to $500 billion today. Germany is left with no choice but to sign, or else be invaded by the Allies and lose even more power. But the true effects of one of the most deadly conflicts in human history take years to unfold. Cause and effect. For all major countries involved, World War I led to irreversible changes. It took Germany 92 years to pay back reparations. These debt repayments, as well as the blame pointed at Germany, were part of the reason Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party became so popular. Hitler claimed that Marxists and Jewish traitors had led Germany into a humiliating defeat and agreed to a crippling post-war deal. When the Great Depression hit Germany in the late 1920s, it created a perfect recipe for the Nazis: resentment towards European neighbors, economic desperation, and a faction of the government already opposed the newly created Weimar Republic. Hitler promised his people the opportunity to take their country back for imperialism and ethnic purity. In Russia, political movements didn't wait until the war was over. Russia's economic production had been pushed to its limits by warfare. A shortage of weapons exposed how far behind Russia was compared to the rest of Europe. As tens of thousands of soldiers lost their lives, the Tsar Nicholas II became resented among military ranks. When Russian forces were pushed back and the food shortages of war hit the population, it was enough to spur a revolt. In part, this was fueled by Germany, who sowed distrust and disruption to draw Russia out of the conflict by smuggling exiled Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin back into the country to lead a revolution. It worked. The Bolsheviks took power through the October Revolution of 1917 to establish what became the Soviet Union. The man who began it all, Gavrilo Princip, was spared the death penalty by being 3 weeks too young. He died soon after in prison in 1918, while the war had already been raging for almost 4 years. In an interview with a psychiatrist before his death, Princip said that he didn't truly believe that it would be sparked by his actions. Still, he didn't feel a responsibility. To him, War was inevitable to win independence. In his final interview, he wished that he be crucified and set alight, with his flaming body acting as a torch to the Bosnian Serb people on their path to freedom. Gavrilo Princip's dream eventually came to fruition after the war. Austria-Hungary was effectively bankrupted by the war, and as the conflict neared its end, the Hungarian parliament broke with Austria, declaring independence and bringing an end to the empire. Serbia then merged with neighboring territories to form Yugoslavia, the first South Slavic state in history. It was a tumultuous union, which involved the assassination of a king, violent campaigns during World War II, a split from the Soviet Union, and a state largely organized around its powerful leader, Josip Broz Tito. After Tito's death in 1980, Yugoslavia slowly came apart, and this led to civil war in 1990, eventually giving way to the creation of separate countries: Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Kosovo, and Montenegro. There's still controversy over whether Gavrilo Princip was a hero or a villain. In Sarajevo, the place where it all began, two separate monuments tell a very different story. At the spot where Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, a plaque and museum commemorate the incident. Further east of the city, though, in between a complex of apartment buildings, the statue of Gavrilo Princip was unveiled on the 100th anniversary of the shooting. Either way, his impact is undeniable.